Today we're going to be in Matthew chapter 6, if you want to find that in your Bible or on your phone, however you like to read. We'll get to that text this week. Last week we didn't spend so much time in text as we did in conversation. This week we'll spend a little bit more time in the text. Mark Moore, I don't know how familiar you are with him. He taught at Ozark Christian College for years. He's been more recently a teaching pastor at Christ Church of the Valley. We did a series of his in our small group time earlier this year on Jonah, and so we listened to him speak a few times. But he has put together a couple of series that have really helped build disciples in churches around the country this year. One of them, the most recent one, was called Quest 52. And it's 52 weeks looking at the life and teachings of Jesus. And when he got to this passage in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 6, starting at verse 19, he started in his book. I've been kind of reading his book, reading through his study. And he had just a little question that I thought was really well worth asking. And so here's the question. Now, I want to preface it this way, in case you haven't been around here that long. You can fact check this with the people at your table, but I started having a conversation with coming to this church right around 4 years ago this time. A little earlier than this. It was in the kind of the early fall. But just been here almost 4 years preaching, and I think I can count on two fingers how many times I've preached about giving, and one of those was last week, and this will make three, I believe. So this is not my weekly conversation. But Mark Moore had this question that I thought was really good, and I think a lot of people in the church ask this question, and I think a lot of people outside the church ask this question. And it's simply this one: why does Jesus care so much about my money? It's a fair question, too. Jesus actually talks a lot about money. So it makes sense that we might wonder. But isn't it true that we talk a lot about money, too? Just curious. It's not, well, that clock's not right. It is 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning. How many of you have spent money already today? Raise your hands. Yeah, 11 o'clock on a Sunday and you've already been spending money. How many of you have talked about money in some way, shape, or form already today? How many of you have thought about money in some way, shape, or form today? Is it any wonder why Jesus would bring up this topic? It's part of who we are. I don't know that a day goes by, I don't know if an hour goes by, that we're not impacted by money in some way, shape, or form. We go to a movie and it's the first thing they want is money. We go out to dinner and right there on the menu it tells us money. We walk into the store to get diapers for our grandkids, of course, not for anybody else, but we go in to get diapers and they want money. Now, when Julie and I had kids, like baby Jack's age, I think it was right around $6.40 for a package of diapers. Do you know what it is today? It's like 26 bucks. Can you imagine? I did a lot of research yesterday. I won't go into all of it, but the history of the prices of diapers over the year, what's impacted it and everything. And I'm just telling you, Procter & Gamble is just a company with a title, but really underneath it should just say Diaper Mafia. It's just nuts. Like, if you look back at what they did in the 70s to knock people out of the diaper business, it's crazy. Same thing in the 90s, and again now, like during COVID, diapers went up 184% during COVID. Now, some of you know this, and I won't say why, but you don't just buy diapers for your grandkids, but, you know, it used to be that diapers were about 6 cents a piece. I remember when we were young and started off with our kids, we went through and did the math. Okay, what does it cost us to wash a load of cloth diapers versus what's it going to cost us to buy, you know, these disposable diapers? I remember it's like 6.5 cents or something like that. It's close to 50 cents a diaper now, right? And by the time I get back into diapers, you know, in the next year or decade or whatever it's going to be, I fully expect it'll be $2 a diaper. You know, it's like The numbers are crazy, and that's just one little piece of life. But every moment of every day, we're facing this thing about money. And so why wouldn't Jesus talk about it? The fact is that money is a part of almost every aspect of life. It's impossible to spend a day of our life where money doesn't come into play. Like even if you stay home and you're sick. You know that kidney stone that I had a couple of weeks ago? 5 prescriptions. I only ordered 3 of them. 2 of them I was like, I don't have those symptoms anymore. I'm not going to take those. But you know what I mean? Like you can't even be sick without thinking about money and what it's going to cost you to get well. Right? So why does Jesus care so much about money? Because we care so much about our money. So our passage today will help us understand this better. Jesus starts off in Matthew chapter 6, 19 through 21, in one of the greatest sermons of all times, probably even better than some of Tom's sermons. But Jesus gets out and he says this about money. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy. I looked up the word vermin because it's not a word that we use every day, and it says teenagers. That's what it says in the dictionary. I think our teenagers know I have more affection for them than that. But at my house, when it came to money, they were vermin, right? They could just go through it. And where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So while it appears that Jesus cares about your money, do you know what Jesus really is concerned about from that passage? Your heart. He knows what money, too much, too little, constant worry about money. He knows what money does to our hearts. Think about the last time you really needed money, you were short on money. What did it do to your heart? Panic attacks, anxiety, paralyzing fear, worry, 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 worry. Think about the last time you had too much money. Never mind. That's a hard one to figure out, but Jesus knows that whether too much or too little, money impacts our heart. He also knows, if you look at this passage, that the accumulation of stuff is a really poor investment. Now, back in their days, I guess the stuff was things that moths would eat, right? Like clothing. It's like, now moths wouldn't dare touch our clothing. It's filled with too much petroleum, right? Like they don't want to eat this stuff. Excuse me. So moths eat, vermin destroy. Thieves break in and steal. I'm just curious, how many of you have ever had something stolen from you? Okay, so I'm looking at this, every table. Would you take a minute and around your table, would one of you just tell a story about a time that you had something stolen from you? Tell it to the people around your table. Would you be willing to do that? While you're thinking of it, I'll tell you my story. Maybe it'll trigger one for you. But in the last church Julie and I served, it was a 100-and-some-year-old building when we got to the town. And housing was hard to come by in that little town. And when we got there, we had a house for sale in Iowa, and we were trying to figure out what to do. And the church had an old house that hadn't been lived in for a couple of decades. It had been used occasionally for some youth ministry, kids programming and stuff, but really, like, all the wallpaper and carpet was from maybe the 30s and the 40s when they built the place, like when they built this parsonage. It was a beautiful old building, like brand new. That was an amazing place. By the time we got into it, I don't know if it would have qualified as shelter for a homeless shelter because it probably wasn't up to community standards. Okay, so it wasn't a great place, but we lived in it for a year, and we loved it because it gave us time to try and sell her house and not hurry to buy something, but give us time to look around for housing or whatever. So we lived in this old place for a year. And shortly after we moved out of it, our youth guy was a very compassionate guy. And Eli came across this guy, and it was somewhere like November, December in Nebraska. It was cold, okay? And this old guy, Joe, was riding his Harley. And Eli had compassion on him. Joe wanted some money for a motel. The truth is, Joe just wanted money, okay? But he wanted money for a motel room, and Eli said, well, I can't give you money for a hotel room, but the church has a house. You can stay in that house. What Eli didn't realize is we still had some of our stuff in that house. We hadn't moved all of our stuff out yet. Not a big deal, but like we had some stuff in the freezer, like the ribs we were going to have for Christmas. Got them on sale 3 months ahead. They're sitting in that freezer. We didn't have a freezer at our new place, and we had room in that freezer, so we left some food in the freezer. And like my Carhartt overalls, which like you're like, oh, you mean the stuff that keeps your clothing from getting dirty? No, I mean the stuff that allows you to go outside and work when it's 40 below zero outside. So I had my black Carhartts were there and a few other things. Anyway, Joe moved into that house for a week. And it was 3 days before Eli even told me, hey, by the way, we got a guy living in the house next door. The fourth day, I figured it out because I came into the office and he'd kicked in my office door. He'd been through the office and tried to steal a bunch of stuff. And then we went over to the parsonage where he'd been staying looking for him, and he'd been through everything. And he'd taken those ribs and put them in the oven to cook them, and he forgot they were there. Yeah, I mean, it was just stuff everywhere. Turns out this guy had been stealing stuff all over town, and we've been putting him up. Like there was a barbecue joint that was just a few blocks away. He got in and got into their smoker and took a bunch of their smoked meat. The guy was on a motorcycle. How was he carrying this stuff off? Anyway, we found the guy. There was a guy I did a wedding for who was in the local police department. And I just put on Facebook saying, hey, if you see a guy on a Harley wearing my black Carhartts, would you tell him I'd like him back? And I get this text almost instantly from Jeff. Dude, I got your Carhartts. I was like, what? Where'd I leave them? I thought they were in the... He's like, oh no, we arrested Joe. This guy had called in a bomb threat to a restaurant that didn't serve him. He got mad, so he called in a bomb threat. He got arrested. He was sitting in the local jail. So my buddy Eli, who's our youth guy at the time, he is furious. Now, this guy has so much compassion. He's a missionary. He went over to Romania after this and worked with orphans for 5 or 6 years. He just the nicest guy, the most compassionate guy. He was enraged. And he went up to the jail. We were visiting another kid that was in jail that we baptized. He went up to the jail, and he saw Joe, and he said, Joe, you know what you did? And Joe was like, and Eli said, no, don't you laugh. He said, do you understand that I will never trust anybody again? I'll never want to help anybody again. Next time somebody comes to me looking for shelter or looking for something, I'm going to remember you, and that's on you because of what you did, Joe. When somebody steals from you, they don't just steal your stuff. They steal your security. They steal your sense of safety. They steal your hope. My brother and his family had their house broken into at night while they were sleeping. They kept their purses hanging by the door. They took the purses. He's got a daughter and a wife, both purses gone. They took his son's athletic shoes and his gym bag. They took anything they could reach, like right inside the front door. It's like, but it's 20 years later, and every night my sister-in-law has to check every door in the house before she goes to bed. They got the purses back. They were less than a block away, been cleaned out or whatever, but they stole that sense of trust and safety. Take a minute and share your experience around the table about a time you had something stolen. It doesn't have to be everybody around the table, but somebody speak out about a time that somebody stole something from you and how that impacted your family. Take a minute, a couple of minutes. So we probably can't agree on everything in this room, but I think we can agree when people steal stuff from us, that sucks. That's a terrible experience, right? We hate that. And Jesus says, you collect all that stuff and you worry about all that stuff, but honestly, the moths are going to eat it and people are going to steal it. That's what's going to happen. And vermin is going to come after it. Let's talk about vermin. My vermin has a name. I won't tell you her name, but my first love was my 1972 Buick. It was what I got instead of the pickup from last week's story. The 72 Buick Skylark. And I loved that thing. It looked like a hot rod. It ran like, I drove it a little bit like a hot rod. You could do 45 miles an hour backwards in that car. Or at least I could. I won't tell you why I had to find that out. But I loved that car. And then I was on my way to work one day to put gas in the car. That's basically, I had a job in high school, and most of the money went into the fuel tank of this Skylark. I was on my way to work, and a little bit of rain hit. And I get to this light, and this guy decides to turn in front of me, like take a left turn in front of me. And what are you going to do? So I hit the brakes. I didn't want to T-bone him. I should have T-boned him, right? Because I missed him. But that little bit of rain, and I spun that Skylark around into this guy's brand new Firebird. I checked to see if the guy in the Firebird was all right. It was rush hour traffic, right? I said, "Are you okay?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Did you see what that guy did?" He said, "Yeah, I saw it." I said, "I'm going to run that guy down. He's at the next light." So I'm taking off hoofing it. And it's just kind of comical because about the time I get up to his car, he just takes off because the light changes. And that happens for about 8 different blocks. Like, finally, I'm out of breath. I'm thinking, I'm going to get in trouble for fleeing the scene of an accident. I go back, and I was devastated. My Sunday school teacher, Phil Culver, taught me what generosity was. He helped me rebuild that car. I didn't have the money to do that, but Phil showed me. He just had a generous spirit, and he helped me rebuild that car, which really meant he did all the work on it because I didn't have any of the skill, right? And I got it all done, and it was my senior year, and it was prom that week, and I was so excited. And I come out of school one night about 8 o'clock because we had show choir, and I was helping build sets and put together lighting and stuff like that. And I get out there at like 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, and that brand new shiny car, the first day I had it at school in the high school parking lot, guess what happened? Yeah, this gal decides to run into it. That's my definition of vermin. Because she didn't report it, she didn't tell anybody about it, she just took off. Now, I found out later who it was, and I forgave her. I didn't collect money from her. But that little dent just stood as a symbol for me for a sermon I heard when I was in junior high at a CIY type gathering where this guy talked about a dent he got in his new pickup. And he said, I just learned that day that if it doesn't have a heart, it's not worth it. That was great perspective for a 17-year-old whose car just got a dent in it. If it doesn't have a heart, it's not worth it. Vermin can come after that. But don't let the vermin steal your heart. They're going to come after your stuff. Thieves are going to come after your stuff. Moths are going to eat into it. Rust's going to hit. Fires are going to happen. Things are going to happen to the things we own if we own stuff. It's just going to happen, Jesus says. And if your heart's in that, what happens to your heart in all of that? But if you have the wisdom that just says if it doesn't have a heart, it's not worth it, that's some great wisdom. It was a 72 Buick. It was 1987 actually. It was an old car. Why was I so bent out of shape? It was a little dent. I could still get the chicks. I had that car when I met my wife. Yeah, it was a magnet. That's probably why she put up with me, is that car. How about this? Have you ever bought something, you just had to have it? Like, I don't know if you're this way, but when I'm thinking about buying something, I want to know everything about it. I want to, right down to where were the components made and who was working the line that day. You know what I mean? Like, I want to know everything I can. I research it to death. And I make the best decision I can. And the whole time, I just, this is what I want. I want that $400 TV. And I go and do the research and realize, hey, that $3,600 TV is much nicer. Did you know a $3,600 TV is nicer than a $400 TV? Right? But like the stuff that they put on the ads, like you go into the store to see it and they're like, oh yeah, we got that tucked away in a closet somewhere. You're going to want this one instead. You know, like you start doing that stuff. But you buy that stuff and then all of a sudden, like, you take that new TV home, you put it on the wall, and the first thing you see is an ad for a better TV, and you're like, oh, wait. I do want that $3,400 TV. I just don't know how to steal it. Yes. Yeah. You need to talk louder, Donald. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy what they'll let you spend on the electronics these days. Oh, yeah, I get it, yeah. Well, I think we've all learned the hard way that we accumulate stuff and people steal it or it breaks down or it wears out and we're left with nothing. So why would we ever put our trust in something that is so temporary as this stuff? Jesus knows something about us. He knows something about me. He knows that I will never fully trust God while stuff is my first priority. And neither will you. You will be forever worried about your stuff. He gives us an example. Like people are going to scurry and worry, what am I going to eat? And what will I drink? And what will I wear? And he's like, isn't life more than that? By the way, the people he's talking to, they don't have faucets to turn on to drink fresh water. They don't have Walmart to go get their clothes. They don't have a grocery store to get the food for the day. Most of their daily routine was what? Trying to figure out what they could wear so they could work, so that they could get food, so they could eat for the day, go to bed and sleep and get up and do it the next day. I mean, and he's like, yeah, that's your daily routine, and that is not life. I like this quote from R.H. Mounts. I put it on the screen. Worry is practical atheism and an affront to God. I should have started by asking how many of you worry. I should have asked how many of you are worried right now, like my chili's burning. Or, yeah. And according to Mounts, when we worry, it's as if we're saying there is no God that can provide for our needs. But there's a few options there. Worry implies that either God does not exist, or God cannot take care of my needs, or God will not take care of my needs. Those are the three options. When we're worried, it implies there is either no God, or God that doesn't care about my needs, or God that just refuses to meet them. And Jesus illustrates this in a couple ways. He says, now the birds don't build barns. They use ours. But God feeds them. Flowers don't work, but God clothes them beautifully. And then he gives us this if-then statement that is powerful. He says, if God takes care of them, then don't you think he'll take care of you? Aren't you more valuable than a bird or a flower to your Creator? Jesus goes on in verse 31, he says, so do not worry saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things. And your heavenly Father knows that you need them, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these other things will be given to you as well. What a beautiful perspective Jesus has on that. When we commit to following Jesus, we commit to making certain rhythms a priority. We talked about this last year. And because they help us live and love and lead like Jesus, and one of those rhythms is generosity. We prioritize generosity in this church. It's not because we're begging for your money as a church. It's because we know that one of the things that we need to do to develop a heart like Jesus is be generous. We are more like Jesus when we give. I mean, the passage that we sang this morning, for God so loved the world, what did he do? He gave. He gave us his son, but he gave. When we're giving, we're more like him. So what we're really talking about here is what my friend John likes to call right-sizing our priorities. It's making sure that what matters most is placed first. It's what happens when we don't have our priorities in order? We worry. We fret. We think about all the things we would do if we were rich and famous. You know what the rich and famous do? They worry about their stuff. And they fret. They build walls and they hire security. Do you remember O.J. Simpson before the Bronco incident? You know, back when he was this amazing world-class athlete and movie star, he said something that shocked his Brentwood neighbors. This is what he said. He said, life's been good to me. So why am I so lonely and bored? I used to wonder why so many rich men commit suicide. I no longer wonder. That's a testimony from somebody who had more resources than he knew what to do with. He was bored with all that stuff. And don't just take his word at it. I mean, he's kind of been canceled in a lot of ways. How about this guy, Jim Carrey? He's made some money, hasn't he? That guy has some money. Look at what he said. I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see it's not the answer. I don't remember. I've been sucked into a lot of multi-level marketing things from people in churches over the years, you know, whether they wanted me to sell Melaleuca or they wanted me to, you know, be in an investment group, what is that, Amera something, or it just like my parents were in Shackley. So we've been around this multi-level marketing stuff plenty. But you know what I've never seen at one of those conferences? This quote from Jim Carrey. It's pretty deflating. It's not super motivational if you're trying to get people to make a lot of money and hoard a lot of stuff. But here's a guy that has it saying, it's just not worth it. The prophet Haggai said something kind of interesting that gives us really good perspective. As long as we continue prioritizing anything instead of God and his kingdom, we'll struggle to have enough of everything else. But when we place the kingdom of God first, everything else will come to us. Because, like Tom said this morning, it's all God's. Or as Haggai put it in chapter 2, verse 8, the silver is mine and the gold is mine, declares the Lord Almighty. And I think if we were to update that today, we'd have to add cryptocurrency to that. You know, it's all his. All the wealth, all the riches, it all belongs to him. It's his. He simply made us stewards of his resources. Can you imagine? Any of you have a financial advisor? And I'm not just talking about your wife or your husband. Yeah, you get a financial advisor. Imagine your financial advisor and you take your money to them and say, I want you to invest this so that someday I can retire or that I can have enough to live on or whatever. And instead of investing your money, he goes and buys that new truck that I was talking about last week. Or instead of putting it in your IRA, he takes a vacation to the Bahamas with your money, on your dime, literally the check you wrote to him. What would you do with that guy? I'd go Donald Trump on him. You're fired. You're fired for that. Don't go anywhere near my money if that's what you're going to do with it, because that's incredibly poor stewardship. And I wonder if the Lord doesn't look at us sometimes that way. When we make some of these foolish decisions we make with our money. It's like, I entrusted you with those resources. And you did that? You really think that's why I gave you those resources to steward? So I guess the question would be, are you wisely investing what God has given you to steward? I think that's part of the question that comes up in this passage. Now, Julie and I, we weren't fortunate like many of you. Many of you grew up in families where tithing was practiced, where Jesus was celebrated all the time and Jesus was honored. And your parents taught you at a very young age to tithe. We didn't necessarily grow up with that. And it was quite an adjustment to learn how to give for both of us because it wasn't ingrained in us. Now, we did that different with our kids. But you probably grew up in a home where your parents did this. But if you're like me and you didn't learn that from your parents, maybe you'd like to talk about the why. Why tithe? The how to tithe is pretty simple. I've heard preachers preach on about this and get it really complicated. They're like, okay, there's 52 weeks, you get 52 paychecks. This is how you figure out and calculate your tithe. And I'm like, well, if I understand the tithe principle, you get a paycheck, you move the decimal, and you pay. I mean, it's not that complicated. My third grader figured it out when he was in the third grade. But the why is harder. Why did the Lord insist on this? Teaching his people to give. And I told you last week I was going to give you two really good reasons. One of them we talked about last week. The first one is this: when I'm generous with my finances, it deepens my trust in God. Grateful giving cultivates trust. You just have to trust. So how's your trust fund doing? Jesus made that crystal clear in Matthew 6. But have you found this little principle that he gives us to be true? Seek first the kingdom and the rest of this will take care of itself. My brother Rusty shared this idea with his church last year. And he shared a really cool story that I want to share with you. He was teaching about how he and his wife found that living on the 90% with God goes further than the 100% without God. And how God has proven that over and over again in his family, that sometimes stuff just lasts longer. Dollars go further, resources show up out of the blue. And while it's hard to quantify, he could testify to it. This is the truth. And I think many of you could testify to that too. But he shared a specific story that I just wanted to share with you. It's so cute, and I think it'll help you remember this principle. When their family was younger, they had this season they went through. They had 3 kids, and all 5 of them needed serious dental work. Like, you can only put that stuff off for so long, right? And then it comes back to bite you. Thank you. And they didn't have the money to pay for it. They needed a couple of crowns, and they had some cavities to fill, and they just didn't have the money. They had chosen, well, they could have taken their tithe and said, hey, instead of tithing this month and next month and the following month, we're going to use that money to pay the dentist. But instead, they went ahead and gave faithfully, chose to do it, and waited for the kids, and then they prayed with their kids about it. And so every night when they get their 3 little ones together and they'd pray about things, one of the things they were praying about as their teeth hurt was, God, would you provide so we can get our teeth fixed? He was a pastor I think he was a youth minister at the time in a church, and didn't have a lot of resources. Anyway, they prayed for that for, I think he said like 3 weeks, and somewhere a few weeks into it, their son Austin was a little guy, and little guys always have the best prayers, right? And their son Austin was just so honest, and he concluded his prayer one night and said, and God, would you please just give us the money for the dentist? Because I'm sick of praying about it. And I think we can learn so much from Austin's honest prayer. Man, pray about this stuff till you're sick of it. Be honest with God about it. Keep praying about it. Because when you pray about it, things happen. You begin to trust. If Rusty and his family had just went and put that dental bill on a credit card, or just taken, instead of giving to the church, went and paid their dental bills with their tithe, or all that, what would that have taught their children? Nothing. But those kids have grown up now, and they have family. Two of them have families of their own, kids of their own. And they've had to learn radical trust. And it was formulated as they prayed for their daily bread as kids. Trust is the first product of generosity. The second impact is powerful too, and it's kind of our focus. When I'm generous with my finances, it impacts the lives of other people. I'm going to ask Mary to make her way up to the stage if she would. But when we're generous financially with what God has given us, we're invited into the fun. We get to be a part of the fun stuff. We get to watch God do amazing things. And last year I had the chance to go and have some fun, get in on some of the fun around the holidays. Mary helps lead out in a couple of significant projects at some other place, and some of our ladies have been working on these. It's so funny. Like this week, Mary runs a sweatshop out of our church. If you didn't know that, like not child labor, but a lot of people that thought they were retired come together and they put together all these Christmas gifts for homeless people, and they work on Thanksgiving, taking care of people that are less fortunate. I want you to hear from Mary about some things going on at some other place right now. Could you share on the mic?
Oh, yes, we all know about some other place.
Let's not assume that. Does everybody know what some other place is? Okay.
It's an organization, nonprofit in Beaumont, and they take care of the underprivileged citizens of Beaumont. And it makes you feel good to be a part of this. It makes you feel great to be a part
Amen.
of this. It's my passion. But what I want to talk to you about today is Thanksgiving, number one. It will be here in a couple of weeks. This year, in October, we had 500 families come to us, some other place, for help for a Thanksgiving dinner.
Wow.
The majority of the people that come to us are on food stamps. And by the end of the month, you know how many food stamps are left for that family? Not much, if anything. So they do need a nice Thanksgiving dinner, and that's what this is all about. We don't use any money. We ask for donations. Last year, we got 10,000 pounds of food from Westbrook. This year, maybe 5,000 pounds. So we reach out to everyone. So when you go to the grocery store this week and you buy the groceries for yourself for Thanksgiving dinner, how about picking something up for that person that doesn't have it? Bring it to the church next Sunday, and we will even give you brunch for it. How about that? We set up a store is how we do it at some other place. So that, excuse me, the families come on the 26th of November. They have a personal shopper that takes them around, and we have all the food set out so they can choose the foods that they want for their table. And HEB has been so generous this year. They are giving each family a $25 gift card for a turkey.
Oh, wow.
So shop at HEB. They deserve it, believe me, yes. And they don't even know I'm telling you this. But it's a great thing. It's really a great thing for all of us to do.
Amen.
Makes you feel good to know that you're helping others. And then there's Christmas. This same family, these families with 500 families
right there.
have at least 1,800 children.
Thank you.
So when you think about that, oh, thank you, I need that, yes. Thank you. When you think about 1,800 children that would not have a Christmas without someone like you. It makes your heart feel bad. So whenever they come and register for Thanksgiving, they also register for Christmas for their children up to 14 years of age. Each child will be given 2 gifts. But that only becomes possible because we will do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My challenge to you is this year when we put those cards on the Christmas tree, which is called an angel tree, take 2 instead of 1. Buy 2 gifts. It'll make you feel good and it'll make that child feel even better. I want to tell you about a letter that Paul wrote to the church of Ephesus to Timothy. This is what he said to Timothy. Tell them to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need. I think you'll always be ready to share with others. By doing this, they will be storing up their treasures excuse me, as good foundation for the future so that they may experience true life. So please remember that and have a good day today. And remember to come to church next week and experience the brunch. Bring canned goods.
Thank you so much.
And thank you.
Don't bring corn or beans.
Not bring corner beans.
No.
Okay,
Can you ever get fired from some other place?
no, can't get fired. Not possible.
A couple of years ago, our leader down one Sunday after church, and we just went down and served and helped set up that store. It's amazing, all the generous people in the community. I'm a little concerned about what you said, that you have less. You had half as much donated this year from Westbrook, for example, and quite a bit more need. Just to give you like the numbers on Christmas, Mary was sharing with me that last year, I think when Eli and Karen and I went down and helped sort Christmas gifts, and how many else? Some of you helped do that too, right? Or you've been down there, yeah. I think it was for 300 families last year, and this year it's for 500 families. It was about 1,300 gifts that were needed last year, and this year it's 1,800. Is that what you said, or more than that, probably actually? So. Would you pray about that? Because I know none of you have 1,800 gifts that you can give. We don't need that many from one person, but would you pray that the Lord put it on the hearts of people to help take care of this? I reached out to another church and just said, is there anything you could do to help these ladies? Because they're willing to serve, they're willing to hand it all out, they're willing to do all this, but they got to have the resources to do it. You got to have the gifts for the people. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Mary. When I'm generous with my finances, it impacts the lives of other people. Grateful giving impacts people's lives. Now, historically, the church has been known for generosity. In fact, did you know that Christians established the very first welfare center? Yeah, a couple of Christians. Christians established the very first public hospital in the mid 300s. And by the 4th century, Julian the Apostate, Emperor of Rome, enemy of the church in many ways. This is what he said about Christians. He said, we ought to be ashamed. At this point, he's talking about Romans. We ought to be ashamed. Not a beggar is to be found among the Jews. And those godless Galileans feed not only their own people, but ours as well. Whereas our people receive no assistance whatsoever from us. From the very early days of the church not only took care of their own people, they took care of the people around them in ways that made the people around them go, What is with those Jesus people? Right? A couple of weeks ago at our meeting, I shared with you a rundown of where we've invested a significant portion of our giving so far this year. And the only significant new expense that we had on that report was for the mission trip we made to Arizona. I shared 318's most recent newsletter with our leadership team, but I want to share it with you, at least part of it with you, because it's about you. This mission on a reservation in Arizona, I don't know, John, it's how many miles away? You drove it. About 1,200 miles away. And you're known in that neck of the woods as those Jesus-loving people. Here's the letter. In the summer of 2023, the director of the San Carlos Apache Cultural Center, Marlo, approached me, this is Tori writing, about building a structure for his cousin Janice. She's in her 60s and for the last few years had been living in a tent in Marlo's carport. And I told him I wasn't sure what my projects would look like for 2024, but I would keep it in mind, and that's my standard answer when I'm approached about a project. And so the summer of 2024 came, and I needed a project. Things fell right into place for Janice's structure. The short-term ministry teams from Texas, that's us, and Minnesota were able to help construct a 10 by 12 foot one-room structure for Janice. And my bonus son, Isaiah, was able to help me shingle the roof the weekend between those two teams. In 2 weeks' time, we were able to go from a patch of dirt to an insulated shingled structure with a window and a door. In October, a team from Ohio ended up painting the cultural center for Marlo. Many of us, 11 of us, have stood in that structure. He was presenting his update to the tribal council meeting the week we were working, and he was asked by one of the council members who was painting the cultural center. And he replied, "Those same Jesus-loving people who built my cousin her house are painting it." When you give, it impacts people. When you're generous, it impacts people. How cool is it to know that you're part of that? You Jesus-loving people. And we're doing it again right here this afternoon for Jack, baby Jack. You know, this kid who starts off way too early, comes into life way too early, spends 74 days in the NICU. His parents are working and running down to the NICU and trying to maintain some sort of a feeding schedule and some sort of a life and try and take care of that little guy. And the bills build up. And do you remember that there was an old show on TV called The $6 Million Man? I think that's kind of baby Jack in the making. It wasn't 6 mil, but it was a lot of money. And fortunately, good insurance and generous parents and good neighbors and friends have helped whittle that down. But today, we want to help pay that off and help cover some of the therapy that he needs so that this family just doesn't keep digging and digging and digging into a hole that they can't get out of. And we do that because it helps us trust God more. And it impacts people's lives. And according to Jesus, you know whose life gets impacted most when we give? Our hearts. When we invest our treasure in the lives of other people around us, we treasure those people like he does. When we hoard it for ourselves, guys like Joe break in and take your ribs, steal your overalls, whatever story was told around your table. But when we invest it, like Mary said, in the kingdom, when we do good with it, God rewards that. Why does Jesus care so much about my money? Because he refuses, as the way Rich Mullins puts it, he simply refuses to allow the stuff of earth to complete for the allegiance we owe only to him, the giver of all good things. He refuses to allow money to get in the way of what matters most, his relationship with us. The Apostle Paul knew it, and Mary stole my thunder, but this is how we're ending today with this passage that she read. And so I'd like to have you just stand and bow your heads, and I want to pray this passage over us. Paul tells young Timothy, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, to be generous and willing to share. And in this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Do you understand that the Father has given you a trust fund? He's given you the resources that you need. He's given you an opportunity to trust Him with those resources. And He's given you a chance to share in the lives of others. Father, we are so grateful for your greatest gift and every other good thing you've given us. We move forward in Jesus' name, trusting you.